Are you tired of being plain? Do you want to heal with style? Well, look no further, because in today's video we will explore the basics of Discipline Priest when it comes to talents, gear, essences, rotation, so you can pick up your priest and go healing in dungeons and raids. Starting with the talents. Before kicking it off, however, this video will be a complete Discipline Priest guide for beginners in 8.2. Our older Discipline guide had some flaws pointed out by very experienced priests, from whom we actually received a lot of help and feedback while making this one. We will be covering the basics, and everything here should be more than enough for you to start. So if you want some mythic level info and advanced tips in general on top of it all, check the Warcraft Priest Discord channel, where you will get links to all sorts of information and connect with people that know the spec inside and out. Now, on with the show! On the first row you should take Schism, and this talent is generally the best on the row. Schism will act as a healing trigger, and you should think of it as a heal mostly. When you pop Schism, you deal a decent amount of damage to the target that transfers into healing through atonement, and increase the damage you will do to the target, meaning an increase to the healing you will be transferring to your group. The talent will be paired in a neat little rotation, but more on that later. On the second row, take Angelic Feather. This row mostly refers to survivability and mobility. In most situations, they go hand in hand, since the point of being mobile is to dodge the incoming bad and keep your target in range to be able to heal, or in this case, apply atonement. Priests have really no mobility outside this option, and although I usually recommend you guys take whatever you want when it comes to utility, this one is a very strong recommendation that you should not change. Third row gives you Power Word Solace. The general purpose of this row is mana management, and this talent syncs really well with the build and rotation in general. Using it on cooldown, you will pair every other cast with Schism for extra effectiveness, transforming into a decent amount of healing for your group. The fourth row is another utility row, and here, honestly, you can pick what you want, provided you can take advantage of it. I would recommend you take Shining Force. It has a general purpose across the content, and usually displacement mechanics are very strong. This will work particularly well in dungeons to deal with those affixes where you know you have to push the bastards away. At level 75, take Sins of the Many. This talent works well when it adds the throughput you need to keep your group up. The more atonement you have up, the less damage this provides, and this is the only throwback, and one that you barely feel anyway. The Priest Discord channel has a nice little chart that shows how the talent affects you based on how many targets you have atonement on, to give you a better idea of what to expect. In Mythic Dungeons, even if you have atonements on your whole group, you still get 6% more damage, and on one target only, you get the full effect of the talent to boot. On the sixth row, I will recommend you take Purge the Wicked as your universal choice here. It's easy to use since it just replaces Shadow Word Pain. It works really well when you have multiple targets that will live for the duration of the debuff, since the damage to healing transfer tends to scale better with more than one target. There is an argument to be made about Halo as well. Overall, in single target fights, Halo will add more to your kit as a raid healer. The AoE is very large, and to take full effect of this you need multiple targets to benefit from the heal, while Purge the Wicked is more passive in a sense, since you would have your targets dotted regardless of what talent you pick here, but either has more usage and specific situations. To start off, I recommend you take Purge the Wicked. On the last row, your option will be based on the content you will do. Evangelism will be your raiding option, and overall the best performing one here. It will also spice up your rotation in a really sexy way, and we will explore that in a bit. The purpose of Evangelism is to extend existing atonements, and the way you will be using it is to keep more than 10 atonements up for the duration of your intense damage dealing phase. With enough gear and haste more specifically, you can even aim for up to 18 atonements, which is almost an entire raid. The Mythic Dungeons option will be Lenience, providing a 3% damage reduction to targets with Atonement. The damage reduction seems small, but over the course of a dungeon it adds up, since there will rarely be a situation where you won't have at least one atonement up. When it comes to the stats, things become a bit less straightforward, but never too complicated. As a general rule to follow, you want eye level most of all. Not only does it provide intellect, but a much larger pool of secondary stats. Follow that with haste and crit, with versatility and mastery lower down the priority list. Haste has multiple benefits, but probably most of all allows you to fit in more GCDs during a specific window, of which discipline has many and all are important. An exception to this is when you have an item with a socket and/or leech. At that point, you want to add the additional stats to what the item already provides, excepting stamina, and compare it with a higher eye level item. The one that has overall more raw stat power would win. It could get a little bit more complicated if you start to analyze it to the bone, so the best way to go about it is to know you can sacrifice a little bit of eye level to get a socket or leech. Sockets stand for themselves, but the reason leech is important, especially for discipline priests, is that it procs twice. Once from the damage you usually do, as with all classes, and the second time from the atonement healing transferred if you have atonement on yourself. In short, when you are not at full HP and have atonement on yourself, dealing damage will make leech a stronger healing stat for yourself than almost everything else in the game. With everything discussed so far, and especially going forward, we will focus more on the healing aspect of Discipline Priest. Yes, there is a damage aspect as well, and usually you build towards it in very niche situations where your raid requires you to push more damage checks and doesn't need the added healing you would do when geared towards a proper healing throughput. I am mentioning this for two reasons. One, this is definitely something top mythic priests do, not all of them, and are making the raid farming easier, among other things. And two, the initial 8.2 Discipline Priest guide we did focused too much on that aspect, neglecting the actual healing potential you can and should do in a group unless told otherwise. As such, a few of the best trinkets to aim for are Deferred Sentence from the Queen's Court and Luminous Jellyweed from the Blackwater Behemoth. These will probably be the first ones you will encounter as you raid, and very solid options to take you through most of the content depending on their eye levels. If you are also an alchemist, you can replace one of them with the Ascended Alchemist Stone. This will require a bit of effort to make, but at least it's not RNG, am I right? These trinkets should get you started with Mythic Plus as well, if that's more your jam, although dungeons drop pretty good statistics as well that can help you out in the lack of better options. As you grow more comfortable with the spec and you feel your group doesn't need as much healing, you can steadily gear towards a more DPS focused build with the appropriate trinkets. Discipline is a spec that has what it needs to function outside Azerite traits. As such, it may not be as straightforward for you to build, but there are a few specific traits that can improve your performance if used correctly. Death of Shadows is a solid trait that works best as an atonement increaser. Sure, the added healing from the increased stacks is nice, but in tough situations, you might not have the luxury of waiting for those stacks to gather, and the 2 seconds extra of atonement will end up being more valuable. As such, you shouldn't stack this trait. Another trait to keep in mind without stacking is Enduring Luminescence, which increases the duration of the atonement it applies from the base 60% to 70%. Extra atonement time means more heal transfer, and that's the strength of the trait. More of them do not increase the atonement past its initial effect, just add to the raw extra healing, which is not that amazing when stacked. Death Throes is a trait you can get and stack if you know you'll be fighting multiple targets, or at least understanding that against one single boss it might not be that good. But seeing as how most encounters have adds and a lot of people will be doing mythics on the side, this trait will prove really good the more targets you have to use it on. Know that to select it you need to switch to Shadow first. A specific trait you could be aiming for to stack as well is Loyal to the End, and this only in the situation of more people in your group have it as well, otherwise it will underperform. This will be easier to obtain if you are raiding, since only Raid Azerite gear will contain it. On the other side of the spectrum, if you'll be doing a lot of mythics and have Residuum to spare, you can aim at some strong stat traits like Blightborn Infusion and Swirling Sands. And these are just some of the most used traits, explained a bit for you to get a better understanding. For a complete list of the strength of each trait that Discipline Priest has available, check the Priest Discord channel, where the boys have done some amazing theory crafting on the subject. As far as the middle and inner traits go, a few of the good ones are Blessed Portents and Concentrated Mending for strict healing purposes, Overwhelming Power to complement a more general approach to the encounter, and Resounding Protection as one of the best defensive options to get. Now let's take a look at the essences. There are two ways to build it, and they tie into what I mentioned earlier. The healing focus build works best in all scenarios and what we would recommend you take while getting more accustomed to the spec and the encounters. The DPS build works a bit better in dungeons and in certain raids where you need and want to push a bit more damage to finish the boss quicker. This route is a bit more advanced in the sense that you need to know how much throughput you are losing and how much your group actually requires to stay alive. Once you know all these things, take a glance at it and go for it. For the healing focus build, go with Ever Rising Tide in your major slot, Memory of Lucid Dreams, and the Well of Existence in your minor slots. This build works best if all of these three at rank 3. If you are missing anything here, you'll need to fill in with what your best rank alternative is, but that would require testing, and seeing as how everyone has a different character in this sense, that testing will come down to you. The DPS focus build sees Crucible of Flame in your major, which can also be used as a direct heal, the Ever Rising Tide and Conflict and Strife again at rank 3 in your minors. Keep in mind that DPS trait as well as trinkets do not contribute to the Atonement healing transfer and are there just to add DPS and nothing more. And speaking of adding things, add our Twitch to your Twitch channels to follow, because we play different specs and stream about 4 times a week. And if you love theory crafting, discussing things that do not make it into our guides, join us at twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline. We mentioned Atonement a lot, but what exactly is Atonement? Atonement is a buff you place on a friendly target with specific spells, which make it so whenever you deal spell damage, part of that transferred to the friendlies as healing and will constitute the majority of your healing output. The spells that apply Atonement are Power Word Shield, which will be your default choice in most scenarios, Shadow Mend, if your target is not at 100% healing and could benefit from it, and Power Word Radiance, when you need multiple atonements at once. Each have a healing or absorption component, but mostly you want them for the atonement mechanic. Using Evangelism will extend the duration of these atonements so that when you pop Schism, the damage window this provides can sync up better with the remaining atonement duration for better healing transfers. Pain Suppression is a single target defensive cooldown that reduces incoming damage. You will want to use this on a group member you know will receive a lot of damage in the following seconds. Power Word Barrier provides a little less damage reduction, but affects a whole area. You can have your group stand in this as the damage is rolling on their faces, or even use this for a single target if Pain Suppression is on cooldown, but do this in dungeons more than raids, since losing the value of an AoE barrier will hurt more in raids than in dungeons. Rapture allows you to spam very powerful Power Word shields that do not care if the target has weakened soul. The shields will be great in absorbing damage, and the atonement added is the next step in making sure the group stays alive. All of these cooldowns mentioned are preemptive cooldowns, meaning you want to use them to prevent damage, not to repair an event that fucked up your group. This is a strong mentality you have to be in when playing this spec. Shadow Fiend, on the other hand, is more of a healing cooldown, since you want to always use this once a large part of your group has atonement on and needs healing. Desperate Prayer is your own little personal cooldown that boosts your health and heals you for the amount, good in situations where you don't want to waste precious time and GCDs to heal yourself. The majority of your time will be spent doing a DPS rotation that passively converts the damage into healing, when in this DPS rotation you want to prioritize the spells as follows. Maintain Purge the Wicked at the very top. Use Schism on cooldown, especially when you have already set up atonements and your group needs healing. Pop Power Word Solace on cooldown and make sure to time it after each schism. Penance offensively on cooldown. Smite to fill in your downtime. Most of your playstyle revolves around preparing for an incoming phase of damage to your group by popping atonements and repairing the damage dealt by following it up with the DPS priority we just discussed. One such preparation is done with Evangelism and follows the next procedure. Apply 5 to 7 atonements with shields and mends as necessary. Shields on targets which don't need healing, shadow mends otherwise. Cast the Ever Rising Tide Essence if you have it. Apply 3 more atonements. Use Radiance twice for 8 more atonements. Use Evangelism here. Cast Shadow Fiend. Cast Schism and a quick Power Word Solace. Cast Penance. Fill in with Smite. And use Penance and Power Word Solace as they come off cooldown. Here you want your Schism and Solace to hit after the raid has already taken damage, since both of these spells hit pretty hard and you don't want to waste the healing. The closer you time these two to the point of the damage, the better. This is where the difficulty of Discipline can be seen and caters to your knowledge of the fight, since knowing when shit's about to hit the fan will make your timing a lot better and your overall performance will stand out above your fellow discs. If you don't have Evangelism, the rotation will change slightly. Start with Rapture, followed by 3 Power Word Shields. Start your Ever Rising Tide Essence and continue spamming shields until Rapture is done. Cast 1 Radiance, then Schism, Solace, Penance, and you already know the rest. In dungeons, the most important thing is to keep Atonement on your tank, followed by Shadow Mending whoever needs direct healing. Next, you want to make sure your target has Purge on them. If the existing atonements are not enough, cast a Radiance to apply a group-wide atonement, then do the normal DPS rotation we discussed earlier. When applying atonements to individual targets, you want to use Shadow Mend for it. Keep Power Word Shield for when you need to move or during Rapture. If more targets need atonements, it's better to just use a Radiance instead of multiple GCDs for mends or shields. Make sure to not be greedy with your cooldowns and use them whenever you judge your group is taking heavy damage. Ending a fight with everyone low will force you to cast infinite Shadow Mends or your group to eat, and this will instead eat your dungeon time. For the consumables, use a Cord of Haste for your rings. Your gems should be a Leviathan's Eye of Intellect, a Kraken's Eye of Intellect. Yes, you can have both. And if you still have extra sockets left, use Quicksand Spinels. Machinist's Brilliance will be your weapon enchant since it procs with Intellect, and Haste since Haste should be your main secondary stat. Get the Intellect Flask, no surprises here, and when you have an intense healing phase, use a superior battle potion of Intellect, although most fights start with the raid not needing heals for a very good time, so pre-potting an Unbridled Fury potion will be the best thing you can do at the start of the fight. Have some potions of replenishment on hand if you have mana issues. Lastly, get the Feast for the food buff or baked potatoes if that won't be an option. I want to shout out the Warcraft Priest Discord channel for their amazing feedback and contribution to making this guide what it is today. And a special shout out and thanks to Clandon and Zaf, 2 of the top discipline priests in the world who have provided so much knowledge to this guide that we would have needed years of experience playing discipline priest. Thank you guys so much, and all of the appropriate links are down below in the description. And we cannot forget our lovely Patreons. Thank you guys for the continued support you provide us every month. And for any details regarding our Patreon system and what goodies we have in store for you, check the description of the video. Thank you for watching the guide and have a good one.